Hello everyone, I'm Cadet Virgen-Garcia, and I will be giving a presentation over rucking injuries and ruck marches. So today's learning objectives are: what is a rucksack and what is a ruck march? What are some factors that can cause injuries? What injuries can you sustain from these factors, and treatments for the injuries? So what's a rucksack? It's basically a large backpack used by the Army to carry equipment, and it can weigh typically to 35 pounds or more. So if you're just starting out rucking, I would suggest going as small as you can as possible. It might seem easy at first, but the longer you ruck, the more weight you'll definitely feel is on your back. So typically it's 35 pounds, but sometimes it can go even more, to close to 60 pounds a rucksack. So rucksacks have straps that you can modify to your body that are on the shoulder and the waist area. And the average ruck march can be from 5 to 12 miles during training. If you're just starting out, obviously they're going to start you out with half a mile to a mile, then a mile and a half, 2 miles, because rucking is not easy on the body. It can be very damaging if done wrong. So if you're just starting out for fun or for training, hopefully you just start out as small as you can and build up some tolerance to rucking, as it's not easy for everyone. So this video is just showing how to adjust your straps as needed. So this is on the waist or hips, and then this is on your shoulders. There's also a buckle that you can strap together in the front if you have smaller shoulders like I do. I'm small, so typically I like to buckle my straps on the shoulders and also have the waistband strapped because it helps keep the weight modified to my body's needs, as I'm smaller, and sometimes a rucksack can kind of feel kind of weird on my body. So you just have to modify to the best of the equipment that you have. Usually for bigger, broader people, it's usually not an issue having to need to strap it. But again, everyone's different. Strap it to your needs. So here's a cause of injury is usually outside forces sometimes. So if you're not acclimated to certain types of weather, that can definitely affect you when you're ruck marching. So hot or cold weather. It's more common to see hot injuries when it comes to ruck march injuries. So having to experience hyperthermia or hypothermia. Also terrain can affect you as well. So depending on, for example, if you're going uphill, that can typically put more weight on your lower back, so you can end up with more lower back injuries, whereas if you're ruck marching on typically gravel roads or rocky roads or something like that, you can sustain more ankle injuries, whether it's a strain or a sprain. So it's different for everyone though, and also where you're training or doing these ruck marches. So there's equipment, there's the ruck itself, so it's very heavy, it's not your typical backpack. They're also pretty big depending on your body size, so that can cause some damage to your body. The boots and socks that you're using for while you're ruck marching, I would try and get a little bit used to the equipment that you're using if possible. So for example, boots, I would not go ruck marching in new boots. I would try to break them in first. And also socks. There are certain socks that you should and should not be wearing, and I will go over them a little bit more. And also clothing. You should wear the clothing that is for the weather that you will be ruck marching in. And I know sometimes you can't help it if you're in uniform and it's a hot day, but try to wear the best uniform as possible for the type of weather that you'll be marching in. And then there's also the personal stuff that you need to do or that you should have done that can cause injury. So water intake. Staying hydrated before and during and after a ruck march is super, super important. So typically you should drink about 8 ounces of water a day, but for everyone it's different. Some people need more water, some people don't need as much water, but I would try and drink at least more water than usual, mostly if you're going out in hot weather, as you can perspirate a lot and you can get dehydrated a lot faster. So water is key to not causing at least hot and cold weather injuries, as water is super important whether it's hot or cold. And there's nutrition as well. So if you're an athlete, you know that eating certain meals before a game usually helps with speed or at least endurance during a game. So, for example, I know playing soccer a lot, they would tell us to eat a lot of pasta the day before, or something high in carbs, or a little bit of sodium. Obviously, good carbs. I wouldn't suggest eating Chinese food like I know some people on the Army, they do. They like to go out and eat Chinese food because it's high in sodium and carbs, and then they go rucking the next day, and it helps have that sodium so that they don't lose as much water, but also helps fuel them with energy for the next ruck. But it's all up to you, and what you know helps you feel better for the next day. So the food at least 2 days before can definitely affect you when you're doing these kinds of activities. Anything involving a lot of energy usage, like ruck marching or running or anything like that. The first injury is heat injury, which is hyperthermia, and it's an increase of body temperature above normal. So this first one is called heat exhaustion. So the symptoms are usually moist, pale with normal to cool skin, weak pulse, rapid to shallow breathing. This really isn't a true medical emergency, but if someone is displaying these symptoms, I would try and treat them as fast as you can, as this can lead to other serious effects on the person, other than just simply dehydration or feeling faint or weak. Next is a heat stroke, which this is truly a medical emergency, so if you ever see someone displaying any of these signs or symptoms, I would seek a medical professional right away. So usually these people display hot skin with dry or moist skin. So little to no perspiration is visible on the person's body. And one of the true key factors when checking for signs and symptoms is checking if this person or this individual has altered mental status. So if they're unable to answer easy questions about themselves, or they're acting a little strange or different than what they were before, I would definitely have them stop what they're doing right away, immediately have them get some treatment as fast as you can. If they're feeling faint, rapid shallow breathing, full rapid pulse, dilated pupils, these are also symptoms of a heat stroke, which can be very, very serious. Then there's treatment for heat exhaustion. So treatment for these two things are just a little bit different. Heat exhaustion is not as serious as a heat stroke, though should be taken seriously, but it's not as much of a medical emergency as a heat stroke. So typically you should move them out of the hot environment if possible, so to a shaded area or air conditioning, so somewhere where they're out of the sunlight, out of the direct heat. Loosen clothing if possible, so at least if they're wearing their uniform, you should definitely unbutton their blouse, take their boots off if possible, any helmets or PC that they're wearing, have them lay supine to have them rest. and have them sip water if they are conscious and able to do so. I do not suggest having them sip water if they are unconscious or while they're lying supine, as they could choke. For heat stroke, this is a true medical emergency, so you do need to contact a medic or medical professional, 911, right away if someone is experiencing a heat stroke, as this can lead to major injuries that can be very crucial to stop before they truly damage the individual. So first, place them in a cool environment, so shaded or air-conditioned area. Remove the patient's clothing as much as possible. So that would mean blouse, top, pants, shoes, socks, PC, helmet, everything. Everything has to go, and it can be an uncomfortable situation, but it's necessary as you need to cool down the patient as fast as you can. So apply cool packs, especially to these areas, the neck, groin, and armpits. If possible, fan them, have wet towels available. Usually in training, at least for basic training, they have ice buckets where they kept towels in ice, cold water. So whenever this would happen, they would have that readily available. I know not everyone can carry around a bucket of ice water with towels in it, but if you can have towels and maybe a separate cold bottle of water, that works too. Anything works to help the individual that's having a heat stroke. So muscle injuries, I do not include joint injuries in this, as joint injuries, anything that severe, should definitely be seen by a medical professional, as it can be very hard to treat yourself if you don't know what you're doing. But I will be talking about muscle injuries as it's easier for you to do self-treatment. So for muscle injuries, typically you'll feel numbness sometimes when rucking, mostly on the shoulders and arms and your feet, because these are the areas that are most impacted by the weight of the rucksack and your body, as the rucksack is applying a lot of compressed weight to your shoulders. So this can press down on the nerves and cause what is called rucksack palsy, which is just a fancy term that they use because a lot of people experience this. This is very common. I know I did a lot when I was getting used to rucking, mostly as the weight got heavier and heavier. A lot of people can experience it in their thighs from the hip belt, so if you have that strapped on a little too tight, definitely make sure that none of your straps are too tight on your body, around your hip or your shoulders, as this can cause injury, or your torso itself. Your feet from your body weight and the rucksack weight, mostly if you're not used to walking such long distances, or the boots that you're wearing sometimes also can greatly affect it. Your toes from walking, of course, with all this weight, sometimes some people tend to walk a little bit more on their toes, some people tend to walk a little bit more on their heels. It's different. So just be careful with feeling these kinds of injuries, as it can be mild and can go away as soon as you take the rucksack off, but if you're not careful, can definitely lead to larger problems. But again, if you're experiencing any joint injuries, I would especially tell you to seek medical attention, or if these muscle injuries are becoming more common as you're rucking or last longer than just the ruck. So if you're experiencing it for like more than a day, more than 24 hours, you should definitely seek medical attention. So treatment for your muscle injuries would be first and foremost to rest as much as you can. So let's say, for example, you did a 5-mile ruck march and you still have 5 more miles to go. If you can rest somehow, whether they give you rest time, take that time to take the weight off if you can, and just rest out your body for as long as you can. Or if you're done ruck marching for that week and you have other activities to do, if you're experiencing any of these pain, resting is first and foremost the best thing that you can do. Also, icing the area of injury periodically and with ointment or just ice itself. I would recommend ointments like Tiger Balm or BioFreeze. Those were the best, and they worked the most for me as an individual. It's different for everyone. Everyone has their different preferences. Some people prefer the icy hot patches, like if they have lower back pain or shoulder pain. Compression is really good too. So if you're an athlete, typically you would see these kind of treatments more. But here I am doing ankle wrap to help with stability for the muscle and the joint itself. I would not suggest trying to do these on your own unless you know for sure how to wrap an injury. I would seek medical help or professional help if there is a medic available, or maybe you can have a doctor show you or someone to show you who's certified to be able to help with these kinds of situations. There's also stretching is super important. So stretching before and after a ruck. It doesn't seem like you should, but when rucking, you're using all of these muscles that sometimes you're not used to using all at once. So this can definitely cause a strain and can definitely cause aches and pains that you've never felt before if you've never rucked. So I would suggest stretching as much as you can. It's just like running. You're using all of these muscles that you would use for running and more. So definitely stretching is one of the best things you can do, definitely to prevent these injuries. And also taking ibuprofen and Advil can sometimes help with these minor aches and pains. So depending on your preference, obviously, I prefer ibuprofen. Some people can't take ibuprofen, so I would then suggest Advil as your next best painkiller. But take these, according to the bottles themselves and the directions that are given. I would not suggest taking these before a ruck. I know some people did that during training. I do not suggest that, as it's just not safe because sometimes you don't need it. So take them to as you like, but do seek medical advice when taking ibuprofen or Advil, if possible. So this is for blister injuries. So blisters are super, super common when first ruck marching. Mostly if you're doing this during basic training where you're just kind of constantly going and you're given these kind of crappy boots and socks and equipment. Blisters are super, super common amongst trainees and also cadets. So blisters are fluid-filled sacs caused by burns, pressure, or friction. So friction is the most common when talking about these kinds of blisters in the Army. It's not always just on your feet, but it can also be on your hands and your torso from the equipment, just kind of rubbing and moving all around, and your feet, like if you're wearing boots that are a little bit too big or don't fit just quite right, your feet will move around a lot, depending also on your terrain and the socks that you're wearing. So a lot of people are very blister prone when not wearing the right equipment. And if these blisters are not properly treated or prevented, they can cause infections and other serious complications. I know for a fact that you do not want an infection caused by a blister on your feet, as it can be very, very painful. And mostly if you're training and it's kind of a non-stop kind of rucking, you're not going to have a fun time. So I do suggest trying to prevent these as much as possible by using the right equipment and taking the necessary precautions. But I know sometimes it can't be helped, so finding the right ways to treat them is your next best thing. So for treatment, obviously prevention is key. So when wearing socks, try not to use cotton socks, as they do not let moisture come out. They actually keep moisture into your feet, which makes it more prone not only for blisters but also for things like athlete's foot, and other infections of different kinds. So change your socks as often as possible when ruck marching or training or anything really. Anything that you'll know will make your feet really sweat and move around in your shoes. And adapt to your equipment as much as possible before you ruck or before you do any activities like this. So again, like breaking into your boots and getting acclimated to like the kinds of socks that you're wearing or the equipment that you're using overall, not just on your feet but on your body, as blisters can appear pretty much anywhere there's any pressure or friction happening from your equipment. So when treating blisters, it can kind of be a little difficult to treat blisters. There's no real set right way. It's dependent on the person. So for me, what really helps is using moleskin padding, which is this rectangular, usually, padding that you can cut and kind of clip to your needs. So what I would usually do is I would measure the size of the blister and usually measure another inch or two away and then cut kind of like a horizontal or vertical strip depending on where it is on your foot. Like if it's on the back of your heel or the sides of your feet, and then cutting a donut hole shape big enough for your blister. You don't want to cover the blister directly. Do not cover the blister directly with any patches or paddings, as this can cause an infection. This can be very painful, and you need to let that blister breathe as much as you can and stop any movement or friction from touching that blister. There are, though, I know some people don't have access to these moleskin paddings, bandages that are specifically meant for blisters. I would use these as a last resort, as it does, again, it applies pressure to the blister itself, so it increases its chances of popping or having an infection, but it also does not help that wanting no friction. So I would use this as a last resort. Please use antibacterial, antifungal ointment cream on this so you don't get an infection. Obviously, I keep saying don't get an infection because this is something you do not want when it comes to blisters or on your feet or anywhere in your body, as this is an open injury, so you're allowing bacteria and other things to build up if you do not take care of your blisters. So please take care of him, so that way your next ruck march won't be so painful. So this concludes my presentation over rucking injuries. Thank you to all who viewed this video, and thank you Nicole Darte for carrying this ruck for most of these clips. Thank you Jessica Mendoza for helping me film when I was treating Nicole Darte for these injuries. Also, you are welcome to pause the video at any time, go back throughout to review anything if you needed to write something down, or if you wanted to read more closely into anything. I know some of these clips can probably be a little bit distracting from the words on the PowerPoint slides, but you have the option to go back if you would like to review anything if you missed anything. Thank you.